Hello there, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. We are starting one more live stream today, Sunday, March the 2nd, 3:33 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time. And let's check if we have any participation so far in our chat. It looks like we don't have a participation so far. So let's share a little bit about the ongoing main Brazilian festival known as the Brazilian Carnival, or Carnaval, as we say in Portuguese. It's somewhat similar to Mardi Gras, which you have in Louisiana, for instance, and other areas of the United States. But for sure, it has a completely different dimension in Brazil. It's a major Brazilian, national holiday. Usually goes from, Friday to Wednesday of the next week. It's also very interesting that Carnival usually happens in the months of either February or March. And many things sometimes are postponed in Brazil to start after the Carnival, just because it's such a long break. And so, for planning in Brazil, it's usually very important for companies to consider when the carnival is going to occur. There is also a lot of discussions about, how relevant carnival should be for Brazil, because of course this represents a large number of days in which people are basically not working. On the other hand, there are many, foreigners who are going to come to Brazil specifically to, enjoy Carnival. So there is always this ongoing discussion if Carnival is something good for the country or not. Many people also say that, like the kind of self-image that we have as Brazilians is impacted by the carnival, right? Too much fun and just like, soccer and other things that maybe Brazil could be a little bit more serious if it wasn't for the carnival and soccer, right? But that's just like opinions and whether you like it or not. The Carnival is indeed a major hallmark of the Brazilian culture. There is no denial. And again, it started last Friday and it goes full force until Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we have something very interesting, which is like a half a day of a holiday. So, because people, that's the tradition, right? Like many people are of course not following that standard anymore. But the idea is that people are enjoying Carnival up to Tuesday, so they cannot come back on Wednesday for work like at the beginning of the day. And therefore, they are going to have like a half a day as a break. And then they are going to, enter the office around noon instead of 9 a.m. as it is, traditional for the working hours in Brazil. We have DG. Hello, tudo bem? Tudo bem, DG? Good to see you over here. Let us know if you have any topics of your interest to be discussed here in our channel. We don't have that many participants. Maybe many of you are already enjoying Carnival, and I'm here talking about Carnival, and our, followers, they are actually enjoying Carnival while we talk about Carnival, right? That could be a possibility. Just sharing, like some of the images we have as of today on the UOL portal. You can see this picture here, like there are many people wearing a mask. This mask is based on Fernanda Torres. Fernanda Torres, she's a Brazilian actor, and she is participating in the Oscar ceremony, and she is considered one of the favorite favorite actors to get the Oscar. We're gonna know quite soon if she's gonna win or not. But it does not matter the result. For sure, Brazilians are pretty excited about the participation of Fernanda Torres in the Oscar ceremony. And then, of course, and by the way, you can see here Fernanda Torres enjoying, like other events related to her participation in a Brazilian movie that is participating. If I'm not mistaken, the name of the movie is Ainda Estou Aqui, or I'm Still Here. That would be the translation. And I'm not sure if there are other categories for this movie, but Fernanda Torres is participating in the best actress or actor, right? The best female actor category, if you will. And that's what you see over here. And of course, then you see, images, beautiful images from the carnival, either in São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, they have the two most developed carnival ceremonies in the country, not surprisingly, right? Like Rio de Janeiro is very traditional when it comes to carnival, and São Paulo, just because of the economic power of the city and the state, it's also capable of getting a pretty competitive carnival parade as of today, right? It wasn't the case like 30 years ago when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. Carnival in São Paulo was basically non-existing. I mean, everybody would celebrate, but there were no parades like you would see in Rio de Janeiro. But then someone said, listen, we are São Paulo. We can get a pretty decent parade. And then over time, I would say that nowadays, the São Paulo Carnival Parade is probably, almost comparable as to the Rio de Janeiro Parade. All right, Didi, why is a voter's card necessary to renew a Brazilian passport? All right, Didi. So, that's a matter of public policy. So the Brazilian government decided, and that wasn't the case in the past, Didi. So that's something somewhat recent, that in order for you to enjoy a Brazilian passport, you should be up to date with your obligations as a Brazilian citizen. And that leads to another very interesting fact, that in Brazil, voting is not optional, right? Like you are required to vote, so you don't have an option, right? Like if you say, well, like I don't trust these politicians, I don't want to vote for anyone, you don't have this option. Like there is a mandate. There is a law saying that, voting is not just a privilege, but is also an obligation for Brazilian citizens. And therefore, if you're not voting, DD, like you should not, again, this is like the Brazilian government's perspective. It's not me telling you, right? It's the Brazilian government saying that if you're not fulfilling your obligations as a Brazilian citizen, you should not have a Brazilian passport. So there you go, DG. That's why, and it's not just the voter's card, right? Like you actually need to be voting in order for you to qualify for a Brazilian passport. What we see, and of course, is a super pain in the neck for Brazilians living abroad to vote, because usually you need to attend a voting section at the Brazilian consulate, and sometimes people are just far away, and of course they are not gonna buy flying tickets or drive like a 7-hour period of time just to satisfy the Brazilian government, and therefore they're not gonna vote. And what they are gonna do if you miss an election, there is a procedure for you that you could potentially complete online, and kind of say, listen, I wasn't able to vote, but I'm going to pay a fine, and the fine is super low. I mean, I guess it's not even like $5 per election. You pay this fine, you file a form, and then you bring your voting card up to date, even if you are not voting. All right, Didi, I hope that helps. UE, hello, 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 UE. Good to see you over here. Double D is saying, if I'm abroad and an American citizen whose mother is Brazilian, right? Abroad and I'm American citizen whose mother is Brazilian, right? So, Didi, if your mother is Brazilian, there is a good chance you are Brazilian as well. And Brazil is not going to make a distinction, right? Like, I mean, if you are originally born in the United States, like Brazil, the only thing that Brazil is going to consider is whether you are a Brazilian or not. And if you were born in the United States and your mother recorded your U.S. birth certificate at the Brazilian consulate when you were a child, then, this procedure alone would confirm your Brazilian citizenship, okay? So that's the matter. That's the point that you need to consider. If your mother recorded your birth certificate at the Brazilian consulate when you were a child, and that would confirm your Brazilian citizenship and therefore trigger the whole requirement of voting in Brazilian elections, DD. UE, what is the safest city in Brazil to live that's also not expensive, right? So we have a page on our website in which we discuss in which we review the safest cities in Brazil. However, the safest cities in Brazil, I would probably say the vast majority of it, they are not really cities traditionally chosen by foreign citizens, right? So they are not really international cities such as São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Fortaleza, and guess which city is missing in my list? That's going to be Florianopolis, right? So in our experience, the vast majority of foreign citizens, they are going to come to one of those cities, right? Again, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Fortaleza, or Florianopolis. From those cities, Florianopolis is going to be the safest one, and not surprisingly, it's going to be on the more expensive side, okay? Now, if you want to stay in a city that is safe, but is not expensive, usually you're going to find opportunities in the countryside, of states, usually in the south of the country. Okay, traditionally, like the countryside of São Paulo state, the countryside of Santa Catarina, of Paraná, of Rio Grande do Sul. These are all states in the south of the country. They are going to be usually safer than elsewhere. Now, there are exceptions, okay? So even in states that are not in the south of the country, you may find safe cities that are also not substantially expensive. So, if you're looking for this combination, safe and not expensive, countryside of the states are usually going to be your best pick, UE. Didi says, thank you for the answer. You're pretty welcome, Didi, and keep the participation going so we can have like an interactive live stream today. As traditionally done here in our live stream, the US dollar is picking up strength against the Brazilian real. During the several past weeks, the US dollar was kind of reducing slightly its exchange power when compared to the Brazilian real. And I can share over here with you, this is usually what we use as just as a referral. And as you can see, $1 is buying, or $1 is buying almost like 6 reais, or is being exchanged for almost 6 reais. And just a week ago, the US dollar was buying like 5.7 Brazilian reais, but as of today is buying 5.9 Brazilian reais. Okay, so it looks like, like some people were betting that, the Brazilian real was going, to keep becoming stronger and stronger, but it doesn't look like the case. Okay, so for those of you who are not following up the exchange rate, the message here is that Brazilian real estate is still pretty attractive for those with a stronger currency, such as the US dollar, the European euro, right, or the British pound. Like if you have any of those three currencies, this means that you have an opportunity to buy real estate in Brazil. Okay, and remember that by purchasing qualifying real estate in Brazil, you can secure first a 4-year residency right off the bat. And after these 4 years of temporary residency, you can then upgrade to the permanent residency in Brazil, which in turn could give you access to the Brazilian citizenship down the line. All right, we have Wilbert Bailey. Welcome, Wilbert. Boa tarde, Senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, Wilbert. I've been watching on Sundays with no comments until now. I had shared once before. I traveled to Brazil last year, arrived June the 1st to July the 30th, 2 months. Okay, Wilbert, so glad you know you enjoy Brazil, and yes, we want you to participate. Welcome back to the live stream, Wilbert. Wilbert is complimenting, I want to return to Brazil in June, but with the 90-day limit, when should I return and how long can I stay? 30 days, or can I start another 90 days? Wilbert, usually I try to avoid, like giving recommendations on the timelines, because even though there are caps, there are traditional caps, it's also part of the Brazilian tradition, and not only in Brazil, but actually in any country for that matter, to decide on how many days you're going to get when you enter Brazil, right? So I'm going to tell you, the usual caps, but just make sure you understand, because just because of the caps, it doesn't mean you're going to get the days that I'm telling you about, because the officers at the Brazilian immigration, they have a full discretion in terms of how many days they are going to give you, all right? Make sure to understand that nuance, Wilbert. But this said, the two main caps you're going to face when entering Brazil, it's going to be, and this is going to depend on your nationality, right, Wilbert? So I'm going to assume that you are a U.S. citizen, but this is going to change according to your nationality. For instance, for Europeans, there's going to be a different rule. But for U.S. citizens, the rule is that you can stay in Brazil for up to 180 days. Up to 180 days in your, they call it like your immigration year, right? So it's not based on a calendar. It's not based on like January the 1st to December the 31st. It's usually triggered by the first day when you enter Brazil, right? So in your example, let's say if you arrived on June the 1st, it means your calendar year or your immigration calendar year is going to start on June the 1st, and it's going to go to the end of May of the next year. That's going to be your immigration year. And within that immigration year, you are allowed to stay up to 180 days, right? And now the second cap is going to be per trip. The second cap is that you can stay up to 90 days per trip. So going back to your example, if the immigration officer decides to give you the maximum number of days, you're going to be able to stay this time up to 90 days, right? Because that's going to be the cap per trip. And since you just spent 2 months in your first stay in Brazil, you're going to be able to enjoy the whole 90 days in your next trip. All right, Wilbert, I hope that was helpful. Don't tread on me. So good to see you here. Don't tread on me. It has been a while. Very glad to see you. Didi, I am in the end stages filing on e-título. If my old Brazilian documents are not accepted, what would be the process to get those documents from Brazil? Yeah, so that's usually a catch-22, Didi, a catch-22 type of situation, because if you have if you have really old documents, yes, they are not going to accept your old documents, and then you are unable to get those things remotely. And the most probable outcome is that you're going to need to take your documents and attend an appointment in Brazil to issue what we call the RG, right? The RG is the main national identification card in Brazil, and the RG is not issued at the consulate. So that means you would potentially have to come to Brazil to get the RG issued. And with the RG, then of course you can also take care of the voting card and the other documents required for renewing the passport as well, Didi. Yui, can you help me find a GF for 1 year? I want to get a Brazilian passport SAP. A GF, would that be a girlfriend, Yui? Like, like you're smiling, your emoji is laughing, right? So I'm not sure if that's the idea to, pursue, like the civil, the civil partnership, or, the união estável. And so you could have, first you don't get the passport, right? Like first, if you have união estável in Brazil or stable union, you would qualify for the permanent residency. And after a year, if you speak like fluent Portuguese, yes, you could in theory apply for the Brazilian passport, Yui. Right, so that's the route that you seem to be suggesting. Not sure. I always highlight, that união estável is not just about upsides. You also have, all the obligations that would come with a traditional marriage, right? So, a very serious type of situation. If you have, a união estável with someone, and this person gets in a, let's say in a car crash and becomes disabled, you would be responsible to maintain this person, to support this person for the remainder of your lives, right? Like of your união estável or your life, right? Like this could be 10, this could be 20, this could be 30 years. You're going to be on the hook literally forever, right? So it's not something to be taken lightly, Yui. But there you go. Don't tread on me. Please don't laugh, Luciano, but is it possible as an American to apply for refugee status from the US? And the answer is yes, don't tread on me. It is possible because Brazil is actually quite accommodating when it comes like to the refugee status. And as long as you are able to reach a Brazilian airport, like you can apply for a refugee status, like there is this current tradition, right? Like I don't know for how long this thing is going to last, but at least as of today, when you show up and you say, listen, I want to apply for refugee status, the Brazilian Federal Police is usually not going to, try to understand the underlying facts, because that's not what they are there for. They are there busy with other stuff. So the current administration is kind of saying, listen, whenever someone says that, they are pursuing refugee status, ask them to fill out a form with all the information they can provide, give them like an entry as a refugee application, and then let's sort this out down the line. Okay, so it doesn't mean you are a refugee just because you completed the form, but it means you have started a refugee application, and a refugee application is currently taking several years to be processed. So there is a huge backlog just because of this approach, right? Like pretty much whoever is showing up at a Brazilian airport and saying, yes, I want to apply for refugee status, Brazilian Federal Police is going to say, all right, here is the form, you apply, you get on track, and one day we're going to, kind of hear what you have to say, right? So just because of this approach of not actually filtering people, pretty much whoever is applying is getting a shot, right? It doesn't mean you're going to receive the refugee status at the end of the process, but you get a shot of it, and you're going to be allowed to stay in Brazil, to remain in Brazil for as long as this process develops. All right, don't try to me. So that's the answer. All right, UE instead of buying property and waiting for 5 years. Yes, actually, if you buy a property, you're gonna potentially wait for 8 years, not 5 years, UE, because when you buy a property, you get 4 years as a temporary resident, right? 4 years. After these 4 years are over, then you upgrade to the permanent residency, and then under this regular track, you need to remain for 4 years as a permanent resident before you can apply for the Brazilian citizenship. So there would be like a couple of years under the União Estável track instead of 8 years under the property acquisition track, right? But I would say that for most people, people are not in a hurry to become a Brazilian citizen. They are in a hurry to start their journey in Brazil. And like once you buy a property, you are free to stay in Brazil. You are free to get a driver license. You can live pretty much the same life that we as Brazilians would live in Brazil. And therefore, they are not really concerned that they will need to wait for 8 years to become a Brazilian citizen. But I understand people have different priorities, Yui, and you may want to accomplish that sooner than later. And of course, you are free to decide on the best route for your goals. Raven Taylor, welcome, Raven. Good afternoon, Luciano. Good afternoon, Raven. How do Brazilians protect their assets in Brazil since Brazil doesn't do trusts? We don't have the same protections, and you are absolutely right, Raven. So nowadays, what we have is the formation of entities pretty much like you see in the United States. You could have an LLC coming from the United States, or usually to protect assets, what Brazilians are going to do, because if you form an LLC in Brazil, it's very easy for anyone to find out about your assets. So what the Brazilians are doing nowadays, they are going to, jurisdictions in which the shareholders are not disclosed, right? So they could go to the Bahamas, they could go to one of those, countries in which the shareholders are not disclosed. And then if you bring this LLC from abroad to Brazil, this LLC in theory could, acquire assets like real estate. This entity from abroad could own Brazilian entities and so on. But guess what? Just like in the United States, nowadays Brazil is also asking you about the final beneficiaries, right? Like, the entire international community is trying to, make sure that whenever you are acting, in a financial or economic manner in Brazil, that they know who's benefiting from this activity, right? So there is this approach of bringing an LLC from abroad and using this LLC to own assets in Brazil. That's the, let's say, the current approach, if you will. But again, there is a change in regulation in Brazil, just like you see in Portugal or the United States, trying to identify who are, the ultimate beneficiaries in Brazil. Just as a curiosity, now in the United States, since last year, there is an effort by the U.S. Federal government to identify the ultimate beneficiaries of any entity in the United States, right? So it does not matter if it is a corporation, if it is an LLC, or whatever type of entity you have in the United States. Now you need to file, and I don't recall. I can show you over here. I mean, I know it's not Brazil, but I think it's so interesting, this subject, that I want to share over here. It's like the boy filing, right? All right, let's take a look. So you see, this is from the federal government, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, right? So now in the United States, pretty much anyone with any type of entities, they should file. Basically, it's a very short form, this BOE, which is like the beneficial ownership information report. They want to know who's behind the business entities, right? So this is a reality even in the United States, and it is the same thing in Brazil. But again, just talking about strategies, to protect your assets, that's what we see happening in Brazil. So people are forming entities, usually abroad, to keep as a holder of other assets in Brazil, and try to make it more difficult for people to attack those assets, right? Like many times we think about legitimate situations in which, for instance, a creditor would try to be paid by going after your assets. But in Brazil, just like everywhere else, sometimes there's going to be some type of situation in which bad actors, they are going to try to pursue your assets as well, right? Like litigation-based. Brazil is kind of late in the game of litigation, right? It's like, 20 or 30 years behind the United States in terms of litigating stuff, but Brazilians are actually learning with the United States in terms of pursue assets from someone else based on kind of interesting legal theories. That's something we are starting to see here in Brazil, Ravens. So I hope that was helpful. We have Yokota Strong. Good to see you, Yokota. Yokota says, bom dia, Luciano. Bom dia, Yokota. Joining late. Watching from San Antonio, Texas. Glad to have you over here, Yokota. Don't tread on me. Also, is my apostilled birth certificate that was confirmed in 2020 still valid to use for my application? Don't tread on me. Just so you're asking about the refugee application. So for immigration, traditionally, the Brazilian immigration, they don't care if your birth certificate and apostille are somewhat old, okay? If you buy real estate, many times the registries, they're going to want like a birth certificate that was issued and apostilled within the last 90 days. For immigration, usually 5 years, right? Like you're telling me about 2020. So, like a birth certificate that was issued in 2020 and apostilled in 2020, usually they are not going to find a problem with that, okay? Don't try to me. Now, like usually the more recent, the better, right? Like, so if you have an option, if you want to, just reduce or eliminate any doubts in terms of acceptance of your documents, then you may get a fresher version of your birth certificate. Make sure it is the long form birth certificate, because in many states in the U.S., they are going to issue a birth certificate without your parents' names on it. That's the short form version. And this is going to be pretty much useless because the whole point of presenting your birth certificate in Brazil is usually to allow the authorities to know your parents' name. So if you have a birth certificate that was issued in, like, I don't know, 30 days ago, it has the apostille, but it doesn't have your parents' names on it, it's going to be useless, despite it being recent. Okay, so that's an important aspect on Charge on Me. Gary Happener, good to see you, Gary. It has been a while. Gary, boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. You said if I submit my residency through your firm, I wouldn't need apostilles, but wouldn't I at least need an apostille on my birth certificate and background check? Gary, this is going to depend on the type of application you are submitting. And the one that we don't usually need an apostille for the background check is going to be the digital nomad route. Okay, so if you are applying for the digital nomad in Brazil, you don't need an apostille for the background check. But yes, you're gonna need an apostille for your birth certificate. Okay, so there you go. Usually for the birth certificate, it does not matter the route. You're going to need an apostille for it because it's part of your identification process in Brazil. And therefore, they don't care if you are applying through a law firm or if you're applying by yourself. You're going to need an apostille on your birth certificate. However, for the background check, for some of our applications, we know that they are not going to want an apostille for the background check when you are applying through us. And this is the case for the digital nomad, all right? This is not going to be the case for every single route. So just to make a distinction, if you are applying through us for the retirement route, it does not matter if you are applying through us or, by yourself. You're gonna need an apostille for the background check. All right, Gary. So that's very typical of the Brazilian immigration. They have different standards for different documents depending on your track. Wilbert, obrigado, Senhor Oliveira. Obrigado você, Wilbert. Glad to have you here. Yes, I am a U.S. citizen. When I go back to Brazil in June and stay 90 days, can I request another 90 days from the federal police? And this is gonna depend on your timeline. So you could potentially apply for an extension of 90 days as long as your total time in Brazil is not exceeding 180 days in your immigration year, right? Remember, immigration year starts when you enter Brazil. Okay, so let's say if you are entering Brazil in June and your immigration year starts in June, it means you have a fresh total of 180 days. And if you stay in 90, potentially you could ask for another 90 days. Just remember, the Brazilian immigration, they are not required to give you any of those things, right? So we saw before, even U.S. citizens coming for a first time and getting like 30 or 60 days, right? And there is no discussion. Like, this is a decision by the immigration officer. Maybe they see something that they don't like. Maybe they are in a bad day and they are gonna just give you 30 or 60 days. Regarding the extension, up to the end of the President Bolsonaro's administration, the extensions they were be giving, quite liberally, meaning that, you would apply and it would be almost like a type of rub stamping thing, meaning you apply, you get it, you apply, you get it. Now, under President Lula, it has changed substantially, and we know of frequent cases in which the foreign citizen goes, requests the application, the extension, and they don't get the extension because they don't have a good reason for asking for it, right? Like, I mean, just enjoying Brazil or loving Brazil is not enough of a reason. And usually a good enough reason is going to be something like this. Well, I am in the process of marrying a Brazilian citizen. I was involved in a car crash and I'm doing, I don't know, like physiotherapy, and I'm unable to fly like in a couple of weeks, like I am supposed to do. Something that would make sense to an immigration officer, right? So that's another nuance, Wilbert, in terms of applying for the extension. You should start the application for the extension about 15 days before your allowed time expires, and you're gonna need several documents. You're gonna need to pay a fee. You're gonna need to show a ticket to the United States. You're gonna need to show financials. You're gonna need to show that you have a place to stay. So there is also like some paperwork, and not just the paperwork, but I would say preparation work for you to apply for the extension, Wilbert. But if you have like a strong reason, most probably than not, you could get the so-called extension, Wilbert. All right, Faz. Good to see you again, Faz. Faz, hello. It was nice having a consultation call with you 2 weeks ago. Fahin here, and I will start the process by May. Glad to hear, Faz. We are going to be pretty happy to assist you. We're very happy to have you here in our live stream as well, Faz. Yokota Strong, if I get a property in Florianopolis and get granted the temporary visa, are there any restrictions on using the property as an Airbnb when not in the country? Yokota, there are no restrictions. That's a somewhat common question, right? Like, listen, I'm going to buy this thing, right, to secure a residency in Brazil, but I don't want to live in this property, right? But let me give you an example. Many people, they're going to do that to reduce the required amount from the traditional 1 million reais to 700,000 by purchasing properties in the Northeast. Okay, for those of you who don't know, when you are securing residency in Brazil through investment in real estate, if you buy properties in the Northeast or the north of Brazil, Brazil is going to give you a 30% break on the required amount, right? So many clients, Yokora, they are going to actually buy in the Northeast, but they want to be living in Rio de Janeiro, for instance, or they want to be living in Florianopolis, right? And so they just buy the property over there for the sake of securing the residency. They are not going to be even living for any amount of time whatsoever. They are going to get a property, they are going to furnish the property, they are going to do short-term rentals, and that's absolutely fine with the Brazilian government. The only thing they want is for you to keep the title of the property. So you cannot buy the property and sell the property a couple of years down the line. You're going to need to retain the property for as long as you want to have the residency, all right? And when you try to renew the residency, very often the Brazilian immigration is going to ask you for an updated copy of the title, meaning that if you sell the property a couple of years down the road, they are going to know it and they are not going to renew your residency, right? Now, they don't care at all if you are living or not in the property. We have several clients, right? And I would tell you that probably most of our clients, they do not end up living in the property that they are buying for the sake of securing residency in Brazil. And again, the Brazilian government is absolutely fine with that, because the Brazilian government is, the deal here is that investing money in the country. Like, they are not like super concerned if you're going to be living or not in the property. They are concerned that you're sending the money to Brazil. All right, Yokota. Yui at Faz, what process are you doing, mate? All right, nice sharing. Donna, All right, Donna, good to see you over here. Good day, Luciano. Having a great time at Carnival. Pretty big thing in this little town. House process going well. So glad to hear, Donna. I'm sure our folks are taking good care of you, Donna. And I'm sure you're having a blast at the carnival, right, Donna? If you could share a little bit how is the experience in a little town, right? Because most people they are gonna be interested in Carnaval in Rio de Janeiro, in São Paulo, in the Northeast. Now, Carnaval in a little town in your area, it's something interesting even to me because I don't have this experience, Donna. So let us know how you enjoying Carnival as we speak. Raven, wow, you said my name right. Glad to hear, Raven. All right, thank you for your participation. Keep the participation coming, Raven. Donna, everybody hit the like button. 19 here, only 4 likes. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for taking good care of us as well. All right, now we have 10 likes. I think they saw your message, Donna. All right, Donna is in the house. Donna is asking you guys to please like it. I agree. We have 19 viewers. We should have more likes than 10. And remember, like, your likes are going to help our business, are going to make sure that we keep coming here on a Sunday to share, content and knowledge with you guys. And it's not only going to help us, but it's going to help other people just like you to find this content when searching over YouTube. Thank you so much, Donna. Yui, wow, the accident example was scary. What happens if I do not have assets in my name in Brazil? So technically, would not be able to support the other person for life. Still on the hook anywhere I go. Yes, Yui, and that's why I share. And I understand. Listen, the chances of something like that happening, they are pretty low, right? God forbid that something like that happens to you or your partner. But I like to share this scenario just to highlight how serious it is to get into a união estável in Brazil. It's not, something to be taken lightly. It's something very serious for sure. And from a legal perspective, you are on the hook no matter where you are. Okay, so some people they say, well, Brazil wanna touch my assets, but my assets are in Europe, and I don't know. Brazil shouldn't be behaving like that, and this is pretty the same across the board. So it's not just Brazil. Like when you marry someone, your marriage is not confined to the boundaries of the country in which you are marrying, right? Like this marriage has repercussions or consequences, anywhere. So again, in this kind of catastrophic scenario, like if you are on the hook to support someone for life, and you just go away, and then let's say the relatives or the parents or siblings of your união estável in Brazil, if they kind of find out where you live, where you have assets, they could hire a local attorney to pursue your assets no matter where they are. It could be in the United States, it could be in Asia, it could be in Europe. You're going to be on the hook, and countries, they do collaborate with each other to make those claims viable, right? Like, countries, they have this kind of collaboration approach to lawsuits because they don't want people to be, left without support, all right, Yui? So the approach here by Brazil, by Europe, by the United States, and other countries, it's exactly to avoid this kind of situation, right, in which you just pack your stuff and say goodbye, and you leave someone who would need support without support, all right, Yui? So yes, pretty serious, and that's why we never, right? We have I had a consultation a couple of weeks ago with a young gentleman, and this was like, he said, listen, I want to get residency in support in Brazil through União Estável, but I don't want to run any risks. And I said, well, so that's not the route you want to follow for sure, because when you when you enter into a União Estável in Brazil, that's actually pretty risky, and I would never advise anyone to follow that route. Right, Yui? There you go. Don't tread on me. All right, thank you. Please give Luciano a thumbs up. This helps him get the word out there and the algorithm on YouTube. Just click the thumbs up. Luciano gives us so much value. I appreciate, don't tread on me. I really appreciate your words. I see the likes are, like 13 as we speak. So yes, they are increasing. I really appreciate. UE is the boy thing also applicable for Delaware and Wyoming, where privacy laws are more strict? That's for sure, UE. It applies across the board, and that's the whole purpose of the federal government to step in. Some jurisdictions, just like you're sharing, they are more privacy oriented, right? And the reason here is like if Delaware and Wyoming, if they say, well, I'm not going to disclose who the beneficiaries are, in theory, this would attract more people to form entities in Delaware and Wyoming. So the federal government said, listen, we're not going to allow that to happen in any U.S. state at all. So the beneficiary owner's information is going to be applicable no matter where you are in the United States. And that's something we see happening across the board. We see happening not only in the United States, but Europe, like Brazil, Latin America, and Asia, right? I think the idea here is like to be able to know who's behind an entity, not just for the sake of taxing people, but probably like to target organized crime, right? But answering your question very directly, yes, it's going to be applicable to every single U.S. state. Ron Giovanoli, I am a neutralized American citizen, but born in Luxembourg. I naturalized. Okay, I am a naturalized American citizen, but born in Luxembourg. I want to apply for a retirement visa. All right, Ron. So Brazil does not have distinctions in terms of, who are going to be. Actually, Brazil does have some distinctions, but they are rare, right? So, Ron, to kind of explain here, Brazil, at least for the retirement visa, Brazil is going to make this visa accessible to 95% of the countries, okay? And there are no restrictions to either United States or Luxembourg. So you could potentially use any of those two routes, right? Meaning any of those two passports for you to apply for the retirement visa in Brazil. Okay, Ron. Gary, my application is based on marriage or a marriage certificate has been legalized in Brazil. Would I still need an apostille for that? Yes, Gary. So for the marriage route, what happens with the marriage route is that this is, really high in our immigration framework in Brazil. So they're going to ask you for very solid documents to allow you to secure a residency in Brazil. And therefore, they are going to ask for an apostille on your background check. Traditionally, if you are from the United States, we're going to use the FBI background check. Nowadays, we are offering the FBI background check, like, the fingerprinting, we are offering in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Okay, both of our offices in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, we have the official FBI forms, the physical forms, right? We have it in our office. You can do the fingerprinting at the office, and then we send it to the FBI. They generate a PDF, a background check with your records on the PDF, and then we send this PDF to Washington, D.C., and then in Washington, D.C., we're going to get the apostilled version of your background check. All right. So now, because you mentioned the marriage route, if your Brazilian marriage certificate has your parents' names on it, in theory, you wouldn't need a birth certificate. Now there are some nuances. Sometimes there is a misspelling on your on your marriage certificate. So usually, just to be on the safe side, we still tell you, listen, if you have, like the birth certificate with an apostille, even if it's older, I think it's still a good idea to have it. But in theory, if you have like the Brazilian marriage certificate, you don't need a birth certificate because the marriage certificate in Brazil should have your parents' names on it. All right, Gary. But again, for sure, you're going to need the apostille on the background check, right? It does not matter if you're applying through FUS or by yourself or through someone else. There is no a shortcut because this is, the marriage residency route is really high in our immigration framework, and therefore you're going to need it for sure. All right, so we are approaching the end of our live stream today. I want to tell you guys we have our next live stream is going to be on Wednesday. It's going to be on Wednesday. That's the last day of the Brazilian Carnival, right? The Carnival started on Friday. It's going to end on Wednesday. Wednesday is usually when people are coming back to their jobs, to their employers. And, some firms, they are going to start early in the day. Others are going to start at noon. Here in our firm, we start actually early in the day. Like we try to, keep a balance between the Brazilian culture and a more international culture. We still respect Carnival, so we give, our team a break on Monday and Tuesday. But on Wednesday, we say, listen, team, you guys got to come back early in the day. So we are fully functional on Wednesday. We're going to have our live stream. If you have still points to be discussed, you didn't get an opportunity to discuss them today, just make sure to come back on Wednesday. Remember that on Wednesday, our starting time is earlier in the day. On Sundays, we are traditionally meeting at 3:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time. And on Wednesdays, we're going to meet at 12:30, meaning 30 minutes past noon. And that's a little bit earlier, about 3 hours earlier than what we started today. So I want to thank all of you who participated. I want to thank especially those of you who clicked on the like button. Again, it's very important for us that you like our content so other people can find our business and our content as well. So I really appreciate for all of you who did like our live stream. I hope to see you next Wednesday, and you guys have a blessed rest of your Sunday.